Hi everybody, my name is David and this is All Things Sacred. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the second half of my notes today. I'm going to be talking about how the goddesses Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati are as embodiments of the three gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattvas, preside over the three charitas of the text, the three chapters, the three episodes, the three major stories, and how the demons throughout those stories are also representations of the gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattvas, but in a perverted form, and how the Devi comes in as the purified forms of those gunas to set right the things that have gone awry in the world. And the reason why we should turn to the goddess is because there's often an imbalance that's going on, much like in the story of the king and the merchant. The king, especially, was thrown out by smaller forces, inferior forces, and we too, in many ways, come into this in our life, even though we are divine children, children of the divine. We are often trapped by the play of the ego and the problems within the world that seem to overtake us. And so we need to turn to the goddess and we need to get these gunas at one within ourselves. We need to get them balanced within ourselves so that we can transcend them, so that we can move from tamas to rajas to sattvas. So what I say here in the notes is that these three forms of the goddesses represent the three gunas in creation. So I read this last time. Likewise, the Asuras and the three stories are reflections of this. This is just kind of an introduction into the notes that are coming. And so Madhu and Kaitaba represent ignorance and arrogance. And we can see this in the story when they say to Vishnu, in arrogance, it even says, you slay us slay us at this point on the earth where there is no water, when the earth is filled with water. And of course, Vishnu takes them on his lap and destroys them because their arrogance is truly a sign of their ignorance. And these are both very Tamasian traits. When one is ignorant, and that is the state that we all come out of, that we all come from, their arrogance will get the better of them because their stupidity makes it so that they can't see that they don't know. They can't see their own ignorance, and so that leads to arrogance, which is an easy thing to destroy because knowledge and wisdom, insight and wakefulness really are the tools that we can use. Wakefulness being the idea of bringing consciousness to our own ignorance are the tools that we can use to get rid of these demonic traits of tamas. I think I got a little bit ahead of myself. Because I'm going to get to that point again in a moment. But it says Madhu and Kaitaba represent ignorance and arrogance. Mahashashura in the second charita reveals violence and passion and forces the Devi to pinpoint him, as one has to when trying to find the underlying problem with psychological issues. So Rajas has to do with our passions, and Mahashashura, the main opponent in the second charita, is a representation of that violence and passion that we acquire when we bring in the Rajasic traits, when we are able to move out of tamas into the Rajasic traits. But these often overtake us we're passionate and we're driven to do a lot of things as Mahashashura is, and we have the ability to make a lot of changes as he does as well. But in the same way, the driving force isn't necessarily a positive one in these types of, in this way of being, in this Rajasic way of being. And that's because it often leads to stress and anxiety and violence and unhappiness and negativity in general. And that's not something that we should strive for. And so Mahashashura's metamorphosis, I mentioned here, and I will talk again in a moment on the next note that's actually specific to this, that this has to do with how psychological issues have the ability to change, how especially something like addiction can be found in Rajasic trait, because some people become very passionate about their addiction. It's what they lead their life for, and there are people who can replace one addiction with another. And that's an example of how we can try to pinpoint psychological issues that are going on, where we catch Mahashashura in one form, but then he transforms into a tiger or a man, back to his bull form, and we have to pinpoint what it is that is really the inner issue. And then it says the third story shows Shumba and Nishumba as ego and attachment to identity. So Shumba being ego and Nishumba being attachment to identity specifically. In addition, it also has the Rajasic, so the fiery rock the Bij. So Sattva is never really viewed as a negative trait. It's the state of goodness overall. But even Sattva has an aspect to it that needs to be transcended, and that is one's reliance on the ego and their continued attachment to their sense of identity, which one loses when they transcend all the gunas. And I'm gonna talk about all those right now a little more. So the notes say in the first story, Mahakali, remember she's the goddess who presides over the first charita. She is the embodied form here of tamas in its purified version, and that as one of the three major factors that go to create the universe, that are necessary to create the universe. But it says in the first story, Mahakali reveals herself as Mahamaya. So the goddesses, even though they are presiding over the text as these three forms, in the three stories, they actually don't manifest as Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. They manifest in varied forms. We don't actually see Mahamaya really in the first charita. She is the sleep that sits upon Vishnu's eyes when the world is covered in water. And so she is sleep. She takes this invisible but heavy and dark form, which is very Tamasian. We see how she can be a purified version of Tamas. And it's really easy to understand how Madhu and Kaitaba are representations of Tamas in their ignorance and arrogance. But it's difficult to be like, what's the good purified form of Tamas, which is darkness. And of course, that's exactly what it is. It's just the dark nature of things, the heavy and sleepful, delusive nature of things. But of course, in the story, she rises. Brahma comes to Mahamaya, comes to the sleeping Vishnu, and propitiates Mahamaya to rise from Vishnu, from his eyes in the form of sleep, so that he could waken and destroy Madhu and Kaitaba. So she is the initiating force that both encapsulates and creates this issue, because if Vishnu wasn't asleep, then Brahma wouldn't have to come and propitiate Mahamaya to leave Vishnu. And she's also the force that liberates and frees Brahma in this situation, the situation from the problem that's going on. And that's a perfect example of how it is Mahakali, who is the goddess of liberation and moksha, manifesting as Mahamaya, and how she could be both, how she could include both. Because Kali is dark, too. Mahakali is dark as well. And Mahamaya here is delusion. And Mahakali is normally liberation. But she's showing herself in this charita as a delusive thing, even though she is the one that liberates us from this. It's truly showing her all-encompassing nature. But it says that it reveals herself as Mahamaya, who exists in the form of Yoga Nidra, or the mystic sleep of Vishnu. That's what her name is, as the mystic sleep of Vishnu. This is the dark tamasic form of the goddess, as she exists as heavy sleep and delusion. So I just kind of went over that. Rama reveals she must be propitiated to give her grace. So this is an important point that we see early on in the tale, that of the three tales, is that the goddess has to be propitiated. That, you can't just expect her to come and give you whatever, assistance you think that you are owed. We really need to learn this sense of humility, to be able to seek outside of ourselves for something greater to help us. Even if that thing that we're seeking outside of ourselves, we understand to be our truest self, our own soul, nature. We have to understand that this isn't something that we normally exist in, that this mindset of the divine and pure being is not normally something that we are, at least coming into it. And we have to seek it out, because if we come onto the path with the belief that, when we're ignorant and arrogant, and we come onto the path with the belief that, you could have the intellectual understanding that the divine is within you and that you have a connection to the divine source and the divine intelligence. But if you believe that knowing that intellectually and then actually experiencing that are such different things, that when one believes that, really, they limit themselves from the creativity of the entire universe, from the aid of the entire universe, when they are unable to humble themselves to the point of seeking aid from the divine source, from something that does seem greater than them, that they have to give an embodied form. Because when they only can find refuge in their own ego, when people can only find refuge in their own ego, they keep themselves at arm's length from everyone else. They create division with everyone else. When one can see themselves in something else outside of themselves, something even greater than themselves, and then something less than themselves, they realize there is no greater and less. And of course, eventually, those propitiations change. One still does offer propitiation out of love, but it often does start with a sense of duty. Whatever way one approaches this propitiation, it should be made. And it really should be made in the sense of love, but duty as well is an all right way of going about things. Hopefully love does blossom, and sincere love in one's heart, because why else would we be making it? We have to seek that aid, because I think I've talked about this in other videos, we need to cry to our mother for her to hear us, because otherwise she's not going to know that anything's wrong. I had an old friend who would always say, a closed mouth never gets fed. And, you sometimes, always, at least with mother, you have to let her know that you need her aid, because she will quickly show that love if she knows that you're sincerely showing that. And, with her being pure consciousness, of course she knows, it's like, you can't hide from your own being. We have this, watcher within us that knows what we do, whether that has that moral compass, that sense of Jiminy Cricket conscience, rather, kind of watching. We can't hide from that. It's our own internal nature, and that is where, Mother resides. So the notes then say, in the second story, Mahalakshmi reveals herself in an active, fiery form as compared to the sleep in the previous one. Here she takes an embodied form, born of the lights of the various devas, and engages in a heated battle. So I made sure to say in my notes there are certain Rajasic terms, although light is a very sattvic term as well. The heated battle especially is the idea of a Rajas quality. Because Rajas is that fiery, that passionate nature that is the, one step up from tamas. And she definitely represents that. Light is a very fiery thing. We could see the more spiritual qualities of light related to sattva, but the fiery qualities of light are very much related to Rajas. And the battle that she engages in is definitely a heated one. We don't even see the goddess in the first one. She is sleep, she is darkness. And here she is bright. She is bright, and she is fiery, and she is active, and she is moving, and that is, Rajas. That is Rajas through and through. The amount of Asuras that she is fighting, the ferociousness with which she fights them, all of that is representative of Rajas. It says, during the battle, she becomes drunk on a divine drink in a very Rajasic scene. So I wanted to point that out here in the notes, because that may be one of the most Rajasic scenes in the entire work, except maybe the slaying of Rakta Bij and all the drinking of the blood. But the Devi does become drunk and says, roar, roar, you fool, for it won't be long till the gods roar in the very spot that you're in. She says, inebriated on the divine drink that she imbibes upon. And, all of that being overwhelmed and overcome with that passion, when you are using it for, righteous action, obviously there's the Devi being the purified form of Rajas shows that there is nothing wrong with that. But when you are on the side of Mahashashura, who is full of anger and rage and frustration and hatred, it obviously isn't a good thing. He is unable to, even come near her. She reveals herself in a Rajasic way with her constant laughter. When she is born from the lights of the gods, she appears laughing, almost at their plight, it seems. And she laughs at the demons, or the Asuras, and she laughs at the battle. And, even with the sound of whom, just simple things like that. She creates whole armies and destroys whole other ones. It's as nothing to her. This is all her play. This is all a game to her. And, it can be very frightening, as I talked about, if you're on the side of the Asuras, but luckily we're not. And although parts of us, truly are. And that's very Rajasic as well, that forceful, intimidating quality, that very big, strong, powerful quality. She shows that even in a battle sequence, much like the Bhagavad Gita talks about, if a battle is necessary, it is necessary, to play your part well is an important thing. And we need Rajas as well to drive us, to seek something greater, because even though it will be pushing us forward to get work done, a lot of times the Rajasic time of our life, as we pass through a Rajasic phase towards the Sattvic phase, will leave us very unhappy. These are times of people's lives where they work and push to make a name for themselves and have status for themselves, but there's no sense of, moral righteousness. There's no sense of real goodness. There's no real connection. It's all for me. All I have to fight and strive so that I and mine can be better. And that, leaves one empty and unhappy. So it creates a lot of good in the world. It creates a lot of progress and change. But in the end, it leaves one an unfulfilled individual, and so they have to seek for something greater. But the Devi does show, as I was talking about, that Rajas does have its place, because she is able to be a representation of it, showing that there's nothing that she can't touch that won't be purified, because she is throughout all creation, but untainted by the impurity of creation. It says, continuing with the same note, that again, though she is the purified form of the guna, and it says, again, though, she is the purified form of the guna, and uses this drive, this Rajasic passion, to pinpoint. She uses, the talent and skill that one gains when they're in that Rajasic time to fight and work on what it is that they love and know, to pinpoint Mahashashura mid-transformation, as she does when she destroys him, which is showing again the necessary quality that one needs to have to get out of their Rajasic phase, because this could go on for a long time, because this stress will be eradicated, and then it'll be replaced with another stress, and that'll be eradicated, and this will be replaced by a worry, and this will be replaced by a depression, and then episode of mania, and then all these negative qualities keep accumulating themselves onto us. But unless we're able to pinpoint the source of all this, the source of our unhappiness, then we're not going to be able to deal with any of them, and they'll continue stacking up even as we get rid of one or another. And so she uses this Rajasic drive to turn it in on itself. Instead of using this drive to, create, more and more and, more transformation abilities, she stops the transformations. And this is where that Rajas needs to be turned. It's back on around itself so that it can kind of like destroy itself. As, this reminds me of the sword suit in the tarot, even though this is an air suit. very active qualities in a lot of the cards, a lot of movement, which is a very Rajasic thing. How they destroy themselves at the end because they become too much for themselves. They become overwhelming, and they need to that Rajas quality needs to be turned inward so that it could find a sattvic nature, so that it could get past this need to fulfill all these passions and instead, seek a life of goodness. And it says Mahashashura is a symbol of the passions that are constantly transforming from one to the next. And I talked about that a lot. I did liken it to stressors and stuff, but that's the end result of all our passions. Everything that we're passionate about, that we run after with so much force, it ends up hurting us. When we're seeking all these external things, they end up hurting us. They end up being our downfall, and we should remember that. We should remember that passion is not the end all. Passion does not show someone to be, like a righteous or good being, a great person, that if they're driven by their passions, then they're a slave to their passions and they're not in full control of their real nature. They're not as they truly should be. They're not embodying that, at least essence of goodness, which is a place that a lot of us can get to without that much work, if we're really willing to turn inward and deal with a lot of these stressors and negative perceptions that we create for ourselves, then if we're not willing to do that, then we'll be stuck in this Rajasic sequence. Sorry, I got a little distracted because the video is getting a little choppy, and there's only like 2 or 3 notes. It's already been 22 minutes though, so I'm going to go ahead and stop there. It is getting a little late, and I don't want to be too noisy for my roommates, but I will do some more videos here soon, probably tomorrow, and hopefully finish up the last few notes. There's not too many left, but there is a few left. So take care, everyone. Have a good night, and I will talk to you soon.